All set.
All right. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon for everyone, unless we have anybody from Hawaii on the line. But good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to our session where we'll spend about an hour talking about technology leadership in practice. Elise Crossland and I from the American Institute for Research will be serving as your moderators today. And the bulk of our time will be hearing from our panelists, who are people that we are working with from the Center on Inclusive Technology and Education Systems, CITES, to do the work of piloting some leadership practices and testing those out as we look to develop a framework for other districts to use. And Tiffany, Jana, and Sarah have been so kind to join us today and talk about some of the work that they've been doing over the last several months with the project. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from their lessons learned, you know, how they knew they were ready to embark on the work, and how the work is moving forward during these challenging times, and times that actually provide unique opportunity for us to really rethink what school is going to be looking like as we move forward. So today, if we move to the session agenda, we will overview the CITES Framework Development work, kind of just a brief overview of the project. We'll hear from Janet, the project director, on that. And then we will open into a discussion of leadership practices with our panelists. We'll have a little opportunity for some Q&A. And at the very end, we'll share some tools and resources that you can use right after the webinar or tomorrow. Get going on doing some of this work in your own district within your own teams. What we hope that we can achieve through the session is that by the end of the session that you'll be able to define these key leadership practices that CITES has noted are essential for inclusive technology planning, and that you will walk away with some new skills for looking at your current leadership practices for technology planning, and some new skills and tools for kind of assessing your current status in order to be able to be thoughtful about planning for the next steps, and how you might be able to apply some of those lessons learned. So our panelists today, I would love for each of you to just introduce yourselves quickly, maybe just who you are, where you live, where Grossmont and Jenks and Wethersfield are, what your title is within the district, and how long you've been working there. Tiffany, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me. We're thrilled to be here representing Grossmont, but also sharing our enthusiasm for the CITES project. We are Grossmont Union High School District. We are 9th through 12th grade, a one-to-one district using Google Chromebooks. We are in the East County of San Diego, so you drive about 20 minutes east from the beach and you run into our district. And so we're privileged. One of the beautiful things about San Diego is you're about 30 minutes from anything. You want to be out in the country, you want to be up in the mountains, you want to be at the beach. So we do overlap. We're mostly suburban, but we do overlap a little bit with that beautiful desert countryside, a little bit of a rural area out there. And I am our Director of Instructional Technology. And something you'll hear me talk about today is that I'm actually fairly new to this role. This is my second year in the role. And that definitely played into some of our self-assessment and some of those other things we're going to talk about later. So you may hear me refer to kind of being the newbie as we continue to chat, but we'll talk more about that later.
And I'll go next. So I'm Sarah Harris. I'm very excited to be here and to be part of the CITES project. I'm coming to you from Connecticut with the Wethersfield Public Schools. We are a K-12 district located in central Connecticut with about 3,600 students. Like Tiffany, I am about a year and a half into my position here in Wethersfield. I am the instructional supervisor of technology. And as I was starting this position, our district looked at how we can sort of split and yet at the same time combine the IT side, so the information technology side, and the instructional side. So we'll talk a little bit about that and share how that led us to the CITES project.
Thank you,
Hi.
Sarah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm Jana Greathouse, and I am a district special education coordinator for assistive technology in Jenks Public Schools. And Jenks is just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is in the northeast corner of the state. And I have been in Jenks for about 13 years, and I've been in this role for almost 10. So my background is in speech pathology. So I am very excited to be here and to talk about our amazing experiences thus far with the CITES partnership.
Thank you all. We're going to spend just a few minutes giving an orientation to the work of CITES and the framework development that our panelists have been engaged in. And Janet is going to walk us through the big picture.
Yes, and I promise I will keep it brief, but we thought we would orient you to the work that our panelists have been doing for the past year. The big goal of CITES is to have assistive technology systems, education technology systems, and information technology. So if you think about how technology works in schools, having all of those technology systems work together for the betterment of students, including students with disabilities, but really for the whole system when those systems talk to each other. So that's the big picture. That's our overarching goal on CITES. We're doing that by creating the CITES framework. And this framework is a set of practices that we are working on that we hope will give some guidance to districts on how to approach this work of an inclusive technology ecosystem. We're attacking, that's too strong of a word. We are doing this work. We are approaching this work in phases, even though this graphic that you see on the slide is interconnected. So even though we're tackling the work in phases just to have some structure to building this framework, knowing that leadership, instruction, and family engagement all happen all the time. It's very artificial to think you work on leadership but not instruction, or instruction and not family engagement. And so we recognize that these all happen, but we are building this framework by focusing on practices first in leadership, and then next year we'll be looking at practices and instructional practices, and then family engagement with a deep focus, but with all of them throughout the process. To build this framework, we are working with districts across the nation. You'll hear something you may have heard in the past of our knowledge development districts. And these are districts that we have interviewed as exemplars to give us information along with our research analysis to write practices or give ideas, some structure to this framework. Then we are taking those ideas that we have, and we are working with these lovely districts. We have 7 what we're calling framework development districts, and these districts, God bless them, have made a long-term commitment with us to try out the practices that we think will build this framework to create an inclusive technology ecosystem. And so our framework development districts, Jenks and Grossmont and Wethersfield, who are on our panelists today, test these practices and work through how this work actually gets done in the trenches, on the ground, and what we see as positive changes with that. We are working right now in the leadership phase, as I've mentioned. And so as we talk to our panelists about activities they've done and goals they've set in this leadership phase, the guiding work is with these 6 practices, which are to create a community-wide vision and align it with goals, to take that vision and create a strategic technology plan that aligns with the district technology plan, to measure progress for continuous improvement with that, engage families in this collaborative process, and develop clear outcomes for professional learning, and taking ownership of the infrastructure, really talking about the technology systems and what needs to happen at that level. And so that's just a quick overview. Leslie will put the link to the CITES website, which is cites.cast.org. And so you can follow our work on our website as we develop practices, gather our research, publish the results. All of that information will be on our website. And so, as promised, that's the groundwork, and I will turn it back over to Kristen.
Great, thank you. I think it's always good to set the big picture before we go deep into the conversation. So one of the things is when we were thinking about doing this webinar is, came with how did these districts that applied to be framework development districts and work with CITES, how did they, what starting point were they at? How did they determine they were ready to embark on the work of enhancing and going further? I think that today, because of COVID and everything that's happened last spring, well, districts, we're in a situation now where there wasn't okay, we're going to think about how we want to expand beyond what we've been doing. And it's kind of like everybody immediately had to decide, we're going to find a way to figure this out. And so in contrast, these districts, these panelists that are with us today actually made the decision to work with CITES and expand beyond their current vision for technology. It's not like they didn't have any technology or a technology idea or plan happening within the district. It was a vision for expanding beyond what they currently had to be more inclusive, to create an ecosystem where these systems are tied together. And that happened before COVID. And so I thought we might spend a little bit of time talking about how they had worked within their own teams and determined that they were ready to embark on this work. And then as COVID has happened, we can talk a little bit about then how the CITES project and the framework development process that they've been going through has actually helped them through that process. So I think that, I forgot I added this slide. So it takes time, effort, and collaboration. Yes, it does. So building this inclusive technology system, we started with the knowledge that it really takes a shared vision. And creating that shared vision is incorporating the vision that actually resonates with all stakeholders. And so you might hear from our panelists today, who are those stakeholders, right? Who was engaged in that process? And that may vary, but generally we think about including stakeholders that are across special education and general education, that include parents, especially right now. That parent piece has come up as a bigger priority immediately. And so we'll hear a little bit about who was included among those stakeholders in the creating of the vision. We do know that leaders and champions within the district, within the school, actually can foster this culture of collaboration. And we'll hear a little bit about how these panelists have leveraged the champions within their district and have served as champions themselves for creating this work. So we'll move now into hearing from Grossmont first and hear a little bit about, just who is the district, what is the district and where was your starting point, and how you've been leveraging that work.
Sure, thank you. Well, we started this work right in tandem with my coming on board in this position. So it was kind of nice to come on board as this program was coming on board. And there were some hidden silver linings in that we discovered as we went through the process. You can see just a little bit about our district there on your screen. As I mentioned before, we're mostly suburban, but we do have some students out in the rural reaches of East County, San Diego. We are, you can see our percentages there. We do have multiple languages spoken within our district. We have a significant population of free and reduced students. a lot of English learners in our populations that we want to consider. And so we know that those students are key parts of our families on our campuses. And our starting point essentially came there's like this 3-tiered system. One is that we started our CITES work. 2 was that we began gaining momentum with our district-wide UDL, or Universal Design for Learning initiative. And 3 was that I came on board. So all of that sort of happened concurrently, which ended up being a blessing, because for me, it really immersed me immediately in these conversations that I may not have known I should be having in my first year in the role. So that was a really, really nice kind of happy coincidence, I suppose. It turned out that we did not have the technology plan that had been sort of in circulation was, it predated even our one-to-one experience, which we've been one-to-one Chromebooks for a little over 6 years now. Kind of somewhere in between 5 and 6 years. We rolled out slowly, and some sites got them first and then other sites. But we've been in the process of going one-to-one and are now fully one-to-one, have been for a couple of years now. So we knew that we had infrastructure in place, along with several years of professional learning that had taken place to sort of acclimate teachers to the basics of these tools that we have available to them. And we knew that our special education team was doing these fantastic, amazing things, that they had incredible staff with passion for this work, but we were operating sort of independent of one another. And so it was really great for me coming into the CITES to be able to immediately have a need to put names with faces and roles and understand, oh my gosh, we have a specialist for that. We have TOSAs for that. We have this incredible team, and now we have an opportunity to bring us all together and build some cohesion. So the big thing you'll notice for us as we start looking at graphs and such was that we did not have an up-to-date technology plan or technology roadmap. And we're calling it a roadmap. California does not require a quote unquote 45-page technology plan. So we made a roadmap, and it was great for me because it made me dive right in and figure out, who are these people? What does this department do? How is that connected? Do we have any statements? Is our mission statement outdated? All of that, myriad of questions. It kind of just came right up to the top where it should be, but where I may not have known to look for it. So that was a little bit of how we got started, partnering with CITES and enhancing our one-to-one program and our UDL work.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move into Jenks. I just want to remind people before we actually hear next is that you at any point can use the chat. So if you have questions for Tiffany, or as we move forward, thinking about Jana and Sarah, if you have questions about what they're saying at any point, please use the chat. We're monitoring it as well. And so it's an opportunity for us to not only ask questions, but just as you're listening and you have a comment like, oh, yes, I wish that we had tied that together too. Or, yeah, you might have a big aha that you'd like to share with us. That would be great.
Okay, so Jenks Public Schools is, you can see the demographic information there. Probably one of the most surprising things, and I found it surprising too, being just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is the influx of Burmese students that we have had in our area over the last several years. We have some Catholic charities that are in neighboring areas. And so they have really helped to pull in a lot of our Burmese refugees and get them set up for success. And so we've had a huge growth spurt when it comes to our Ls. And we like to joke in our district that we put a sign up advertising our special education program, because it just seems like people move to Jenks for the special education services. But but I will say that the CITES partnership became known to me because as I had said before, it's been almost 10 years that I've been in this role. And so I had been able in those 10 years to develop relationships with our state assistive technology group. And it was one of the employees there who shared the CITES partnership application with me. And she had said, I thought about you guys, thought you might want to look at this and possibly apply. So I thought, well, of course I want to apply because this very influential person for me is putting this under my nose. And so we kind of applied not fully knowing what was going to happen. But at the same time, I felt after 10 years of being in this role that I was starting to get comfortable. And I know that that's typically a sign for me to look for something new and to challenge myself in certain ways. And we certainly have a district also where we have this culture of continuous improvement, and we're always looking for opportunities to grow. So we submitted the application and then kind of rounded out the rest of our team. But I think once we submitted the application and in reviewing what the CITES partnership was all about, I was like, oh, we need this because our IT, EdTech, and assistive technology departments, while all fabulous in their own rights, each department had their own set of policies and procedures, but there really wasn't intentional communication between departments. And so, I think each of our departments was, again, very well established, but there were those times where I found myself thinking, it would be nice if, we maybe had gotten some information sooner. And I'm sure that the other departments had the same thoughts. So it was I think it was a time for us to reflect on those practices and really fine tune and to make improvements so that we could move forward more efficiently as a district related to technology. And like Tiffany was saying, one of the things that we noticed was we all had these visions for each of our departments, but it wasn't shared and it wasn't documented anywhere. And so that was one of the things that we had looked at, was really pulling our undocumented visions together into one that we could document and share with many, many stakeholders. So anyway, that's our Jinx overview.
All right.
Thank you.
Jana and Tiffany, something I find really interesting every time I talk with you and I listen to the other participants in this group, and something that I found particularly powerful about this work is the similarities, right? So as I listen to both of your stories, I hear our story. You're located, thousands of miles away across the country. And I think that is something I have taken away, perhaps kind of the biggest overarching piece I've taken away from this work is that we are very much not alone in this work, and that our work really can mirror each other across the country, and we can learn from each other. So I think that's just a big picture piece that as I listen to your description, you're going to hear a very similar story from me, because we are working, we are doing the same work. So I think that's kind of exciting. So I'm in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and our district is significantly smaller than the other two districts you've been introduced to today. We have about 3,600 students. And our district is primarily suburban, but we do participate in Connecticut's Open Choice program. So we have a number of students in our community who live not in Wethersfield, but in our capital city of Hartford. And we have in our community a growing population of students from families who speak a variety of languages. I think this year we're at about 44 languages. And so I, like Tiffany, came to Wethersfield about a year and a half ago, a little more than a year and a half ago. And when I came, Wethersfield was looking to rethink and restructure their technology department. So they had traditionally had a very traditional IT department that focused on providing teachers, providing students with the technology they needed to learn. Everyone in the IT department was primarily focused on the technology. And so when they had the opportunity to hire someone new, they decided to do something a little bit different and build what they were calling a collaborative team. So there is an IT supervisor for our district who is an IT expert and specializes in the IT areas and network engineering. And then they hired me. I was a former social studies teacher with a background in application of instructional technology, but really my background was how I used it in my classroom and how I'd worked as a teacher leader in my former district, looking at how we can use technology to improve our teaching and learning. And so that was very different for our district. But I think that I came in from the beginning with this vision that we would work collaboratively as a team. And I started working very closely with our special services team. Our special services team and the IT team always worked closely, as they do in all districts. But the emphasis really had been on, we need this tool. So in a PPT, it was determined that a student needs an iPad, and the IT team, was amazing and got those the next day. Here's your iPad, here's what you need. But as I started thinking about it, and as I started working with our new instructional supervisor of special services at the time, she and I started thinking a little bit differently about that. And we started wondering if maybe instead of focusing on the technology, our focus should first be on the instructional goals. Our focus should be on the learning goals. And then we took that idea and we sort of thought, well, how can we leverage that in our collective work, our combined work, hers in special services, mine in instructional technology? And we settled on assistive technology as being this kind of shared goal, shared area of focus. And so we started together gathering a team, and we started working with special educators and regular educators and our SLPs and our OTs and our principals, and saying who's interested in rethinking how we look at assistive technology in our district. And we put together a team, and we were able to get some support from our state education resource center and do a couple of days of training around assistive technology. This was last fall. But as we did that, we started thinking, well, there seems to be this overarching idea of the universal design for learning, right? This overarching idea that, again, it's not about the technology, it's not about the tool, it's about the learner goals and the instructional goals. And so just sort of weeks into this work, we saw the CITES application and we thought, well, this is like it's written for us. Like, this is our dream and our vision of what could be possible, but we never thought it could be possible because we were just kind of starting out with the seeds, if you will, of the project. So we were really excited to apply. It fit perfectly into what we saw as our next steps. And that's where we are now. To be honest, our work isn't as far along as we had hoped it would be, because for the past 8 months, as all of you have been, we've been working through the challenges of COVID and making sure that we can support our learners wherever they are, whether they're in classrooms, whether they're at home, whether they're at the kitchen table, or whether they're in both in some cases, because we have our hybrid project. But I think where we are now is we're really starting to refine our vision. So we are in the process of working through reflections on what the vision that exists. And like Tiffany, that is from one-to-one. So really it talks about, desktop computers, and really reimagining that vision to focus not on the technology, but on the learner goals and the instructional goals.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. Again, use the chat if you have any questions for Tiffany, Jana, or Sarah about the starting point. I think some big themes that I heard were making sure that there was a lot of communication and collaboration across departments. Tiffany, we do have one person that's asking about if there's individuals from different departments that are tracking this technology use, and how you're kind of weaving that together. And so as we move forward, you might think about how especially now that we're moving into the graphs, that I think that's actually going to apply into the conversation directly. And then I really liked this. Yes, it's not about a specific tool, right? If it was, we'd never keep up, because there's new technology coming out and new ways of thinking all of the time. When I was first trained as a teacher, text to speech used to be on a computer in the corner of the classroom, as opposed to accessible on every device that anybody can touch, right? And so technology is advancing so quickly, but it is about the learner's goals and the vision for instruction and how we move forward. So the CITES assessment, this is the kind of the first big activity that our panelists, our framework districts went through with the CITES team. And it's an assessment that allows for the ability to be able to kind of track your starting point, right? Just collect some baseline data of where you are today, and then you're able to then reflect back and look at, okay, so we got some baseline data. Let's now get to work, create some action plans, and then go back and reflect on what went well, what do we still need to work on, and where are our priority areas as we move forward. So Janet, if you could go to the next slide. The real purpose of the CITES Self-Assessment is to support the team in establishing this baseline, right? And that allows us then to really prioritize action steps, prioritize goals, and also monitor this progress over time. And so what it does is it allows us to be able to actually put a numerical snapshot on some of these key leadership practices that we're field testing. I mean, that's what we're really doing right now is we're field testing. We're hearing from the framework districts what's working and how we might actually enrich and embellish those practices to round them out so that they're most successful across all district contexts. So what we would like to do now is provide an opportunity for our panelists to talk a little bit about their baseline data. And so the first one we'll talk about is creating a community-wide vision. And within that, there are multiple pieces from, you know, do you have a representation of multiple types of roles on your project, right? Does the vision achieve the goals, the district goals that you've set for learning, right? All the way to how have you communicated the vision? And so we're going to give a little opportunity now for the panelists to talk about, wow, this was your data. What was surprising to you? What were you like, yep, this is what I expected to see. And you know, just what was your, what did you do as a team then with this data after you had collected your baseline?
I'm happy to jump in just so that I can sort of start to address maybe that question from the chat as well. We had, as we started the process and started the self-assessment, we all worked individually because we really wanted to make sure that we weren't having any, you know, conversation bias or halo effect or anything in our conversation. So each of us took the assessment individually, and that included my team, who is a team of digital learning coaches, or TOSAs, teachers on special assignment, and they work the closest with the teachers. They are the front lines with our teachers in terms of implementing professional development, consults, support, coaching, all of those kinds of things. And then we also had leadership from our special education side of the house. So we had directors from special education involved in taking the assessment. We had our assistive technology lead, who I believe I saw here today. I think she's here kind of observing the webinar. So she was able to provide great insight that I would not have otherwise had access to, as well as some of the curriculum specialists over in special education, you know, additional teachers on special assignment. So, and the former leader who had been in this position also had an opportunity to, he's kind of stepped up to a role of overseeing all of our professional learning across the district. So we had a lot of voices coming in. And you'll notice we're the orange line on that graph. So after we all did our own assessment, we sort of brought together the team and calibrated. And I was a little nervous about that. We all know the secret to baseline data, which isn't necessarily that you want to aim low, but that you want to lean into being honest about where you are and where you're not, so that you truly can celebrate growth. I think sometimes we undercut our ability to see growth because we want our baseline data to look shiny and we want it to look fantastic. But really, the reward comes in being honest about where you are as a baseline. You'll notice for us, we did not have a parent on our panel, and so that was a 0 for us. We had sort of pieces of a vision. We had a vision that was created many years ago. We had pieces of a roadmap. We had some things that were structured, but some things that were very enigmatic or implied. And so we knew we had those pieces, but we had no communication about that whatsoever. And so we really just leaned into and embraced that. And it was kind of one of those nowhere to go but up sort of opportunities. And we knew that we were taking the first step, which was joining into CITES and joining this collaborative community of other educators who were going to embark on the same work as us. And we knew that was the right next step to take. But we knew that we were starting from 0 in a few places, and we just really embraced that. It was in a much easier calibration process. My stress was all for naught because we did end up, coming in fairly closely. We had great conversations. Brene Brown always calls that rumbling, and I love that. So we had some rumbling around those things, but it really helped us to bond as a team was those conversations, and someone from my special education team saying, well, actually, I'm going to push back on that a little bit and say that we have been doing great work in that area. And it was just that we didn't know. And so it was enlightening for us. And, I think that was really a great part of our bonding process as a team, was coming together to hash through those numbers. But we really weren't in any sort of, crazy dichotomy anywhere. We sort of settled, and all of us agreed to sort of lean into maybe the lower numbers so that we had that room for growth.
So Tiffany,
Thank you, Tiffany.
I
Go
saw
ahead, Sarah.
Sorry. Tiffany, I saw similar initial reactions from our team. I think, as educators, we don't want to get a bad grade. And I think there was some reflection, and I viewed myself, I saw it at first like, oh no, well, if we're really low here, what does that mean? And how is that reflecting on us as a team and as a district? And so I think it was a really good and really important conversation to say to teachers and to say to everyone on our team, this is baseline data, just like we use with students in the classroom. This is baseline data, and we are just starting this project. And we chose to participate in this project and apply for this project specifically because we knew these were areas for growth for us. So I think it was embracing that and accepting that was really important, and a little bit tough at first. And I think, I really emphasized to the team that no one should take any of this personally, because I found, I'm in technology, so I got some emails from teachers who said, hey, these are my responses, but I'm sure there's things I don't know. And I said, it's okay, right? This isn't about me or you or anyone specific. This is an area that we've all identified as growth, an area for growth for the team. And so that was really important and really valuable. And we, like you, had some discrepancy in our responses, which to me was even more valuable because it showed us that communication was an area for growth for us, right? We had some really fantastic things happening within the special services team, or our IT specialists could speak about the infrastructure, but we had teachers who didn't know about those things and didn't have any idea what was happening, because we're all in sort of our silos and our bubbles going about our work, which I think was just a really powerful communication to all of us that this team is even more important than we understood.
Yeah, and I really don't think that I'm going to add anything hugely beneficial after what Tiffany and Sarah just shared. But I will say that, like Sarah, we had that conversation too, that this is, it's not something that we need to take personally. It's an opportunity to be honest with where we are and to really, to see these quality indicators laid out so that we know what a quality inclusive technology system looks like was very eye-opening. Like, some of us were like, oh yeah, that is important, but until you have it right in front of you, it's kind of a nebulous cloud. So it was nice to be able to anchor our conversations in these quality indicators as we were reflecting on our practices.
Great. If we move to the next slide, and why don't we start with you, Jana, since you were third last time, but this is about the work of developing the strategic technology plan. And so again, an opportunity to really reflect on, where was the team at the beginning of this process? Because it really helps us then to set some of the goals for doing the work that is in front of you.
Yeah, so Jinx is the blue line, and I think the reason that we scored ourselves so high in this particular area in general is just because our ed tech department is phenomenal, and they work really hard to implement educational technology, and so it was probably like my AT piece that was kind of bringing us down a little bit. But again, you know, this is a place where we can be honest about, you know, what do we need to do to maximize the effectiveness of our practices. And, you know, and our ed tech director is very knowledgeable already in accessibility features and those universal tools for accessibility. And that's a huge bonus because I know that a lot of districts don't have that level of expertise across technology departments. So I think just in this section and the previous section with the vision and plan, what we were noticing is, yes, we kind of do all of these things already, but it's not written down and it's not documented.
Yep.
Wow, are we going to be able to get 40s across the board once we put something on paper and share it out with people? So, you know, what we think is understood by all of us in the different technology departments is not so well understood outside of the technology departments. And so I think it's important to have that so that people can reference it to get them pointed in the right direction and to know where to go.
I'll just very quickly echo that, Jana. You'll notice some of those things we were not started or zero. And it wasn't that pockets of outstanding assistive technology practices were not taking place. It was that we had never taken the time to implicitly include that in our protocols or our infrastructure or our vision or our plan. And so that, you're absolutely right. Our baseline jumped from 0 to 40 basically once we sat and had that conversation and rewrote the vision with the words assistive technology or technology for all or technology for varied learners, and really made a point to include that language, which of course the intent there is that it makes a difference in improving the practice, not just the language, right? That we really continue to refer back to that vision and go, oh, that's right. We have a new set of language that we're really committed to here in our vision, and we're gonna put our money where our mouth is, so to speak.
And I'll echo that. So when we started shifting from what we're calling the what to the why and the how, that was pivotal for us. So we had a budget that was fairly well organized, and we had lines that said assistive technology and instructional technology. But it was when we started looking at not just, you know, increasing technology, which is number 16, but why are we doing that and how are we using it? And then what impact is that going to have on our students and on our instructional practices? That was really a pivotal moment for us as a district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. As we move forward, Janet, Sarah, I thought maybe you could start us off on this last slide, because I think it really, what you just said leads beautifully into this next slide, which is that, you know, how are we transitioning to measuring progress for continuous improvement and thinking about the how we're going to do this. And so I'll let you talk a little bit about the conversations you've been having.
Sure. So we have a lot of technology. We're very lucky that we've been able to try tools and have the hardware and the software and applications to support our students. But something that we saw, and you can see this with our green line there, something that we really saw as an area for growth was the reflective piece, the data piece, the using the data, because we have so much. How are we using that data to make decisions and really drive our decision making going forward? I think someone mentioned earlier that there are absolutely, despite the terrible challenges we've all faced, I think there are absolutely silver linings to the last 8 months and the experiences that we've had in school districts. And for us, one of those silver linings has been, particularly in the spring, the opportunity to try things that we never would have tried, that became available at no cost for our district and gave us opportunities to be creative in ways we couldn't have done. And so when we first started looking at this in the fall, we thought, well, we don't have any data. We're going to have to start collecting data. And then it might have been Jana or Tiffany, another district said, oh, we have so much data from the spring. And we looked at each other, and I looked at our special ed supervisor and we said, well, oh, right, we do too. And so I think it was that realization that this isn't necessarily about going out and collecting all sorts of new data, right? Using the data we already have is how we're starting. So we're actually going through some of our engagement data that we collected in the spring. We're taking a look at some of the surveys that we've administered to teachers in the spring, asking, what really was pivotal to your instructional practices in remote learning? What could you have lived without? What would you say will be really important when you return to the physical school building? And those sorts of questions and that sort of data is where we're starting, rather than starting from scratch and collecting new data.
And I don't want to interrupt, but Sarah, you had a great thing you said in one of the cohort meetings on that you took the brand names out of those discussions and asked people for strategies and to describe it differently. And I thought that was really insightful.
And it was really interesting to see their responses. So instead of saying, do you like Pear Deck, which is fantastic, it was, what are your instructional goals and what is allowing you to get there? And I think that was something that our teachers hadn't necessarily been asked, and their responses were really interesting and really valuable for us as a CITES team and as a larger district instructional technology team.
Tiffany or Jana, do you have additional comments you'd like to add as you think about the use of data?
We were the district that said we had tons of data. We were data rich, certainly, but we just had not defined any practices within the technology sphere to go in and look at that data. It was happening. It would happen in some formal spaces and some informal conversations, but we hadn't really committed to timelines or consistency or which stakeholders would always be involved in those conversations. And so I think just recirculating back to the data and saying, why am I holding this Bright Bites data here in my office? Like, why is that not part of a conversation with my colleagues here? And one of the huge takeaways for our district in this whole process so far that I would put in my top 3 yay sites is that we decided we were going to meet monthly. And it sounds so straightforward and it sounds so obvious, but it didn't happen. It wasn't happening. And all of us were committed to, we need time to talk about professional learning together. We need time to talk about data together. And so we all just made a commitment. We spent about 20 minutes just calendaring one day and getting all of those dates in the calendar for the year. And that's been a huge takeaway for us already, to be able to know that we've got that. As things come up, we go, oh, cool, add that to the agenda. And it's not something that just slips through the cracks. It's there, and we know we're going to have that conversation. And we knew that data was one of those things. One of our TOSAs over in our special education department recently did a survey with her teachers around professional learning and immediately shared that over to what we're now calling our SPED tech team, shared that with us so that we could all sort of sift through it and unpack a little bit ahead of our next meeting. So that process is already starting to take flight for us, and we're really appreciative.
Oh, I like the idea of the SPED tech team. We might have to look at our data to see if we require a SPED tech team. But I do just wanted to say very quickly that I feel like we all could drown in data because of all the data that is floating around. And so just being able to pinpoint what data we want to use and when has been so important for our purposes. But I think we've got multiple means of acquiring data. It's just taking that time to analyze it and figure out how we're going to apply what we learn.
And that's a great point, Jana. Not all of it is worth our time. and some of it is worth way more time than we're giving it. So I know we all got a ton of anecdotal evidence as we surveyed staff and moved through COVID. And so just really kind of understanding these are just sort of our moment in time snapshots. How do we want to use them? How does our vision drive how we use them?
Thank you. I could talk about data and the use of data to drive continuous improvement all day long. I am so grateful for that reflection. And I think that you're right. You know, we need to ask ourselves repeatedly, why am I even bothering to look at data, right? It's that connection back to how is the data going to help us answer a question? So what is our question that we have? What's the question on the table? And then what data do we have? And so many times where we've got the data is just going back and thinking about for what purpose. Before we move into the reflection and lessons learned, and we do only have about 9 minutes left to be able to be together today, so we'll have to have these reflections and lessons learned be, just a quick summary of, Tiffany, you already shared, one of your top threes, but your big lessons. Christopher Bagay actually asked an interesting question that I would like to make sure that we don't ignore, which is, it seems that turnover creates a barrier to systemic change as people are shifting and changing, and asks the question of what actions could we maybe take to help create a legacy for the work that isn't so dependent on the who is there, but rather that there's a culture that's been built. And I was wondering if any of you would like to respond to that question before we move into your reflections. I think Tiffany does. Good.
Absolutely. And my answer is very straightforward, which is that when we looked at determining benchmark dates and timelines, we specifically included circling back to the roadmap annually. It absolutely must be a dynamic document. It's a document, it must be a dynamic practice. And we explicitly included 2 times per year to circle back to not only our vision, but to circle back to our roadmap. Specifically COVID is driving that. We didn't have global pandemic on our roadmap, but now we have a need to continually revisit. And as we looked at sort of the data section in those slides, and we determined, have you set benchmarks and timelines? One of the ones that we included was circling back to those practices as a team. And so even if I, moved on or someone else on our team moved on, the goal is that the team would still continue to meet those benchmarks of revisiting those documents and keeping the vision and the practices fresh.
I like that a lot. So with regards to our big aha, right, spreading the learning, we only have a couple minutes. So what's been critical to your work, or what's your big one strategy or leadership practice that's been most effective that you'd like to leave the participants with as they would move on with their day today? Who would like to go first? Sarah?
Sure. So I think for us in Wethersfield, I would say the collaborative nature of this project and of our team across content areas, specialties, areas of expertise has been critical. So I think building a team that isn't just your technology team. Our technology team is stronger because we have instructional technology, we have special education, we have related services, we have teachers, we have a parent, we have students, and all of these people with different perspectives have made our work more practical and more meaningful. From the instructional perspective. And then I think the second piece, I've said it before, but it really is what's driving us, is that focus on learning goals and instructional goals, how we use the technology to drive what we're purchasing and the decisions we're making.
And I will go next and just say that the self-assessment is near and dear to my heart because it has served as the springboard for all of the conversations that we have needed to have to know where to focus our efforts in making improvements in our inclusive technology system. It's just been a safe place and a platform for us to discuss what is needed. And part of that is, like Sarah was just saying, and that Tiffany has said also, that intentional communication that happens between departments. So.
Tiffany, would you like to give your big takeaway?
I just added some to the chat, but you've heard our takeaways. Commit to the collaboration, get it on the books now, and commit to making sure that roadmap or plan or whatever your district is going to use to guide you is not static. It has got to be revisited. Get those dates on the books now so that they don't elude you as everybody's schedules get confuddled and busy. Get those dates annually on the books early and commit to keeping that work and that conversation dynamic.
Very good. Janet, I think that it's going to be important, especially with the conversation that's happened today, for us to move to the next slide from the discussion straight into actually the tool, because what we have done is it's not the full assessment that our panelists got to take, but we do have an opportunity to share with you a worksheet that provides a snippet of that assessment, and actually I think can serve as really meaningful work. Is there a way, Janet, for us to show that on the screen?
Well, yes, if the link works. So let's try it. So you heard our panelists talk about the CITES Self-Assessment, which is a very comprehensive tool, and it takes some real effort for a district to do that. I want districts that are listening to know that we will have for CITES a complete toolkit for the general public that will include the self-assessment and the goal setting tool and some of the other tools that the districts have used at the conclusion of our leadership phase. So that will be in 2021. So those two tools will eventually be available to everyone. In the interim, though, we have created just a short worksheet that I'm displaying on the screen that is based on the leadership practices that the self-assessment that Jenks and Wethersfield and Grossmont and all of the other framework districts used. And it is a really good way for your district to, Kristen mentioned that readiness factor. Districts don't jump into this at 0 to 100, right? It takes many conversations and champions and thinking about, what does inclusive technology mean in your district? And if that is, it takes a while to even get to the place where you might fill out something like a CITES application. And so I think take a look at this worksheet. I believe that Leslie's putting it into the chat. And this is a good place to start with some of the questions that the districts that you've heard from have been using as their self-assessment the piece. So it's a worksheet based on the self-assessment, but it won't take you 25 hours. It's just a short way to kind of get into that readiness piece, and know that if your district is, having those conversations and you're starting to get into that readiness and ready to take the next step or commit more fully as a district, these tools will be available to you as we develop the framework. And then, I mentioned it earlier, but to keep going back to our CITES website, because as we build things, we're putting it there. So it's not a traditional website that, ta-da, it's all done and now you go there. It's like, as we are working with our framework districts and we develop tools and practices, we add to it a little piece at a time. So.
Thank you, Janet. And what I love about that worksheet is it actually helps to immediately walk away and start the work of talking. This is what I heard from all three of our panelists today, is the critical piece of talking to their colleagues and how lots of great work was happening, but not everybody was aware of what was going on. And so this worksheet really just starts that work of talking to each other, and that in and of itself can be so powerful. I know that, so the worksheet link is in the chat. Also in the chat box is the link to the survey. We appreciate you giving us feedback on this webinar. And so if you could just take a few minutes and provide us with a little bit of feedback, we would appreciate it. And we are at the end of our time together today, but I appreciate you all joining us. Thank you, Tiffany, Sarah, and Jana, for sharing your stories. And I guess that's it for today. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.